Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Institute of Research and Advocacy. It's an absolute honor and pleasure to have you all gathered today. Special thanks to everyone for taking the time and joining us today on a Sunday afternoon. Believe me, I know how that feels, but we're really thankful. Let's give ourselves a big round of applause to start off the event. My name is Dr. Madnia Sheikh, and I'm one of the executive directors of IRA. I would like to begin by giving a brief overview of our program today. First, after this welcome note, the president of IRA, Mr. Faiq Siddiqui, the magnanimous personality, will give us an overview of the vision, mission, why, and what is IRA. After Mr. Faiq Siddiqui, our keynote speaker, Michael Billington, from the Schiller Institute, will discuss the topic of today, which is One Belt, One Road. Following Mr. Billington, we will have Dr. Farhad Sabah discuss the CPAC arm of the One Belt, One Road initiative. Then we will have a short Q&A session, and then finally Mr. Khalid Azam will honor us with the conclusion and closing remarks of the afternoon. Today's event is in collaboration with the International Schiller Institute. On behalf of IRA, I would like to thank the Schiller Institute to accept our invitation and join hands with us. Thank you, Mr. Elliot Greenspan. Elliot is a co-director of the Schiller Institute of New York City. He has been instrumental and extremely helpful in organizing and collaborating today's event. Also, I would like to thank Diane Sayre, who is the founder and co-director of the Schiller Institute New York City's Chorus branch, I suppose. The International Institute the International Schiller Institute was founded in 1984, which makes it 34 years old as of this year. It was founded by Helga Zepp LaRouche, who is also known as the Silk Road Lady for her promotion and for the decades of peaceful cooperation among the sovereign states in the world. Next, I would like to thank our two auspicious speakers to take the time and engage with us in this informative discussion. Mr. Michael Billington from the Schiller Institute, who will speak on the new Silk Road becomes the world's land bridge, a shared future of humanity, one belt, one road. And Dr. Farhad Sabah from the Institute of Research and Advocacy will be discussing about the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, prospects and challenges in socioeconomic development of Pakistan. It is said that the names have a profound impact on a personality, organizations, and so forth. My name, Madnia, means civilization. And civilization is defined as a stage by which a society or a place reaches an advanced stage of social and cultural organization and development. The name that we chose for our institute, IRA, precisely reflects that. By providing this platform, we want to advance the intellectual bank of the Pakistani American community. We want to tap into the reservoirs of the Pakistani American community's intellectual talents and positively potentiate the image of our community in the USA. The other premise that IRA has been established is based on knowledge. The first Quranic word of revelation was Iqra. Iqra literally means read, and reading is the fundamental basis of knowledge. The whole idea behind establishing a platform like IRA is to bring like-minded intellectual people together, help forge new relationships, strengthen and advance our community, help us better understand the world's affairs with discussions like the one we're hosting today, and most importantly, pave the way for our future generations. And I repeat, one of the main objectives that Mr. Faiq Siddiqui was just constantly drumming to us, he wants to leave footprints and wants to pave the way for our future generations. At this point, I would like to invite our whole team of IRA, which includes myself, Dr. Faraz Sabah, Mr. Faiq Siddiqui, Dr. Khurshid, who is not here, but he sends his love, will join us next time, I hope, Mr. Khalid Azam, and Anul Haq. Finally, I would like to thank our visionary, Mr. Faiq Siddiqui. He's the president of IRA. Mr. Siddiqui is considered a mover and shaker in the Pakistani American community with an exhilarating personality. I promise you that I've not been paid for this and I'm not buttering him up. But I really do believe Mr. Siddiqui is an aura, it has an extreme positive aura, energy around him, and he motivates people into action. He's the mastermind behind this whole event and many more to come. A prominent figure in the Pakistani news industry, Mr. Siddiqui made a foundation for himself in the print media as a managing editor and a columnist for the Urdu Times. Inevitably progressing into television media, Mr. Siddiqui has spent the last 25 years hosting political talk shows for networks like Third World Broadcasting, Time Warner Cable, ARY, and currently TV1. When he's not hosting his weekly show, he's likely hosting philanthropic events, constantly fundraising for causes that he believes in. He's a champion for the people, broadly praised for his community for his unique, out-of-the-box approach. Faiq Siddiqui remains focused on bringing future-focused change for the next generation. At this point, I would like to warmly welcome Mr. Faiq Siddiqui to come and briefly reflect upon his visions, goals, and objectives of IRA.
Thank you, Madnia, for your kind words. Ladies and gentlemen, indeed, it's an honor, pleasure having all of you here this afternoon. And why am I doing this? I will tell you, God knows, but we know also. Why am I doing this? And where did this idea come from? There are a couple of things which everybody has been asking me, and I want to clarify those questions and very openly, loudly. Number one question which they have been asking me is this, that usually think tanks have funding from agencies or government or political parties. Where are you going to get your funding? What is your affiliation? We have no affiliation. We have no funder. We will raise fund within ourselves, within the community, and we have munificent sponsor, plethora of personality, generous people, and we know we can do it by ourselves. So we have no affiliation with anyone. And why, when the idea come to me, actually today I will admit that I have been a victim of procrastination. I have been hiding with my problems. I know communication is the key of success. Communication is matter. How do you paint yourself in this society? And we are very poor in communication. I have been thinking, and Jahangir Khatak Saab, a friend, very close friend of mine, is sitting here. I have been talking to him to put up a think tank, and we want to do all these activities, but we never get the courage, and we never, because I was running, I was hiding myself. And long time ago, I read an article written by Lloyd C. Douglas. Maybe some of them who has been a student of English literature, they know him very well, who wrote some beautiful books like Thoreau, Magnificent Obsession. He wrote an article, and the name of article was Escape. And the point which he made, which remind me, which motivate me, which ignite me to take forward, to go forward, the point which he made was this. He said, don't ever run away from your problem. Prevail. Get them right where they are. And I have been hiding that I'm a Pakistani, I'm a Muslim, they are doing a propaganda against me, how to face it, let's just sleep well, get out of this. No. The key is this, that go and communicate with them. And how to communicate with them? The best way is this, that you should have a platform where you can raise your voice. In think tank business, what do? You do kind of a research, you do public relationing, you discuss relevant topics, and then you try to connect your opinion with the policymakers. And now, then the people start asking me, what kind of a think tank is in your mind? Because there are 2-3 different kind of think tanks are in America. Like some think tanks, they do only research, some they do dialogues, some they do research and the dialogue both. Like Wilson Center, Brookings Institute, I'm a long time member of that think tank, and Carnegie. They try to do more, they shed more lights on different topics to understand it better. In compared to them, we have some think tank like Heritage Foundation. We have Center for Progress, Center for American Progress. They have more affiliation towards, they have affinity towards politics, and they do follow those political tracks. But we are not going one of them. We are going to emphasize on one thing, and what is that in my mind, what is that in my heart is this, that after a long observation, I come to this conclusion: if you are not on the table, then you must be on the menu. And the time has come that we should sit on the table. Why? Because our youth, most talented people I always meet, my youth, Pakistani youth here, our education ratio is high. Intelligence of our youth is extremely well. We have great scientists, we have scholars, everything is here. And more than that, they love America, they can serve America. We have a scientist sitting here, Dr. Sabah, like my sister to me. She's a great scientist. We have real scientists. We have like 22,000 Pakistani doctors are serving this society 24/7. But we never had a platform where we can go sincerely sit down and invite different sort of people from different ethnic backgrounds, from different communities, and work for the betterment of United States of America. America has given us so much. America has given us so much. Now this is the time for us to pay back. And whenever I see Pakistani youth here in America, I find them in a very good shape, mentally, emotionally. And what I want to do with Dr. Sabah and Dr. Madnia, we have been discussing this scenario, and we want to introduce them, our youth, how to think as an American. Please stop thinking as a Pakistani. If you want to be successful, stop thinking on a narrow, low vision and start thinking on a broad spectrum. As soon as you will enter with a broad spectrum, you will see you will be very much successful. And this is the country of my children, my grandchildren, and this is the time for the baby boomers to go away. We are going somewhere. We are going somewhere, and I want to pass on this baton to next millennium generation to take away and love this country, communicate with the people. And then one friend, he asked me, what kind of activities are you going to do? I said, we're going to perform different activities, such as, I'm not in favor of going and printing a book, because nobody has time to read the book. I rather go with 2-page memo for a politician. I will go more towards the blog. I will go more towards the tweets. And I have to go. This is American saying, go with the flow. And it is right. Go with the flow. Whatever is happening here, go with the flow. And we will take the new avenues. And because why? Then they ask me, why you think that you will be successful? Because this time we have so much fake news. This time we have so much social media. and they are not authentic. They are not authentic. Now people are looking for real research. Like, I'm very proud of my team member, Dr. Saba. When she do research, oh my God, the way she read, the way she think. My colleague, Jahangir Khatak Saab is sitting here. I have team, I have people, and we have resources. We have everything. We don't need resources from the outside to become organ of some political group or some views. We have resources, we have people. What we need was this platform. The platform is here. I am very thankful to my friend Elliot Greenberg here. Elliot is sitting here. And we discuss all the time different topics in our think tank and Schiller Institute. And thank you very much for all of you that you came here. And I appreciate your cooperation with us, particular Schiller Institute. Mr. Richard is here. Mr. Billington is here. Diane is here. And all those friends whom I see regularly, they are here. And this is the time for Pakistani community to get up. Do something for America. Think as an American. Stop thinking as a Pakistani. That part is over. You are in a new life. This world is going to change now. Within 20 years, this world is going to be a strange place for you. Mr. Gilani, a long-time supporter of my endeavor, is always here. My friend Mr. Faik is here. So many good people whom I love. Tahir Saab, my Ustad, is here. So I appreciate all of you that you showed up here. Anullah Saab, what a man. He is the man who always supported my innovation, my idea, and he said, okay, Faik Saab, go ahead and do it. Let's see what it will bring out. So I believe that you guys will cooperate with us in future also. And now, because the time for me, I took, I think, more time, because we have two very legendary scholars here, Mr. Billington and Dr. Saba. This is their time. I thank you very much. Let me introduce. Every Saturday, Sunday, we have a meeting here in Midtown, in Schiller Institute. And some people, they become your friend. You become very close to them. Elliot is one of them. And he has been a marvelous gentleman. And I want him to please come and show your face to our people and say a few words.
Not only my face, but you also want me to say a few words. Okay. No, I on behalf of the Schiller Institute, I want to thank Faik Siddiqui, Dr. Sheikh, Dr. Saba, all of you. Faik and we have been, as he just indicated, in regular, ongoing discussion. The Schiller Institute in New York has done about a dozen conferences over the last 4 years on the One Belt, One Road, on the development of the new Silk Road, on its economic, cultural, and strategic implications. And Faik has been a regular participant and contributor at those events. We invite all of you to such events. As a matter of fact, on February 16, the Schiller Institute will be holding a national and international conference in New Jersey. You have on the table outside, hopefully you picked up or you can pick up an invitation. Let us shape a new, more human epic of mankind. The Schiller Institute Conference coming on President's Day weekend. You're invited. You definitely want to get back to us as you choose to attend that conference. But so again, Faik has been gracious in asking us to join with your association, with your event today, and to bring in one of our leading people, my brother-in-law, Mike Billington. You'll see him momentarily. But on the way over, we turned on QXR, and there was the Mozart Solemn Vespers, which, if you know the piece, is a totally glorious piece, and the Schiller Institute New York City Chorus, under the co-direction of Diane Sayre, who was introduced, sitting there. Our New York City Chorus will be performing the Solemn Vespers, I think, April 28. You were all invited. The last concert the Schiller Chorus did was a Friedrich Schiller birthday celebration concert with the focus on Beethoven. This was 2 months ago in New York. And I understand a young lady here who's a cellist will be joining our orchestra for an occasion coming very soon. Where's your daughter? In any case. But the significance of the Mozart, there she is in the back. The significance of the Mozart birthday is that Mozart, among many things, but one of the crucial aspects of Wolfgang Mozart, which you would not know, perhaps, is that he was in the circle of Ben Franklin and of the American Revolution and of the ideas of man and of nation and of culture, of course, that we associate with the American founding fathers. That goes to what the Schiller Institute is. Helga Zepp LaRouche, during the Reagan administration, when Lyndon LaRouche was brought into the Reagan administration around LaRouche's proposed strategic defense initiative, Mrs. LaRouche created a think tank called the Friedrich Schiller Institute, which had the intention both of bringing nations together out of British imperial geopolitics. You would be familiar with the British Empire and British imperial divide and conquer, turning nations and religions and ethnic groups against each other for the purpose of maintaining their imperial power and looting humanity. The intention here of our work over this is now 35 years, is to end British geopolitics, and you can read Mrs. LaRouche's New Year's message, that's also on the table outside, and bring nations together for the purpose of the common interest in economic cooperation and development as the unique basis for peace. As the Pope put it 50 years ago, the new name for peace is development. And to add the decisive element of a cultural renaissance, of tapping the best in German classical culture, from Bach, Mozart, Beethoven, Brahms, through in concert with the American founders, with Franklin, with Hamilton, with Lincoln, and so on. This is broadened now as the One Belt, One Road has developed across the globe. We proposed, Mr. and Mrs. LaRouche in 1992 proposed a new Silk Road. They called it the Eurasian Land Bridge. This is now becoming a world land bridge. What China has done with the One Belt, One Road, as Mike will go through in depth, just transformed the world. And the CPEC, which Dr. Saba will go through, is a crucial, actually the initial element of the One Belt, One Road. The one relevant precedent of, I think, extreme importance is the Westphalian Treaty of 1648, when you had a religious war, a 30 years war, between Catholic and Protestant, destroying Europe. 30%, 40% of the European population killed, something like that, in that 30 years war. And it ended with a treaty based on the idea of the benefit of the other. Catholic for Protestant, Protestant for Catholic. Forgive and forget. And this Treaty of Westphalia generated international law and the development of the American Republic as the height of this, 1776, 1789. That's the tradition which this movement, which Mr. LaRouche created, which Mrs. LaRouche has developed over these years, this is a movement which is now bringing nations, traditions, the best of traditions, the best of philosophies together as we perform that through our choral work, for example, through our scientific work. That will then come together in this conference, February 16. So, again, our thanks to Faik and his associates, to Dr. Sheikh, to Mudnia, Dr. Saba, and with an invitation for all of you to join us. We'll be back in touch subsequent to the conference.
Thank you, Elliot. That was very informative. Thank you, Mr. Faik Siddiqui. And now I would like to introduce our keynote speaker from the Schiller Institute, Mr. Michael Billington. Michael Billington, I have to introduce you and then I'll welcome you. Will speak on the new Silk Road becomes the world's land bridge, a shared future for humanity. He is a contributing author and editor of the Schiller Institute's special report with that title, The New Silk Road. He is the Asia desk editor of the Executive Intelligence Review, the news and intelligence online weekly publication. Based in Washington, D.C. area, he regularly addresses and meets with the diplomats, especially from Asia and Africa, as well as institutional figures and intelligence experts from the U.S. and internationally. He is also a scholar of Chinese philosophy and history and parallels with the Western Christian outlook. His presentation today will focus on the extraordinary progress since 2013 of the One Belt, One Road initiative of President Xi, I hope I can pronounce it right, Xi Jinping, including the CPAC initiative. He will discuss the process centered with the U.S., Russia, China, and India, the four powers joined by other sovereign countries to create a new Bretton Woods monetary system, which is long spearheaded by the Schiller Institute and its president, Helga Zepp LaRouche. He will draw a very sharp contrast to the divide and conquer, genocidal, imperial war aims of the British Empire historically and currently. Please welcome Mr. Michael Billington.
Thank you very much. I'm certainly delighted to have been invited and to have this really pretty astonishing gathering on a Sunday afternoon. I appreciate all of you coming out. What I want to do is, before I discuss the Belt and Road per se, is to situate the Belt and Road historically, which will give you a sense of how we in the Schiller Institute and the Executive Intelligence Review have placed this. Is it getting through? Yeah. So I think you have to start from the perspective that the world is in an extraordinary crisis, one that's unprecedented in our lifetimes. The reality of a general move towards war is perhaps more intense and more dangerous at this point than in any time during the so-called Cold War. One of the top American scholars on Russia, Dr. Stephen Cohen at NYU, has made that point. He said, during the Cold War, we were close to war, but people knew what horror such a war would be, and there was constant dialogue, discussion, finding ways to avoid that and to work together. And that is now gone. That we have a situation in which the hysteria against Russia and against China as well in the West, in the British areas and in the United States is absolutely intense, a level of paranoia which compares with the McCarthy period in the 1950s. And yet there's no reason for this. There's no reason for the conflict between the United States and Russia or the United States and China. None. If you review just briefly what brought about this hysteria against Russia, it began in 2014 with the Ukraine situation, a situation in which the United States State Department under Obama proudly funded and sponsored anti-government institutions across Ukraine. The U.S. stateswoman responsible for that, Victoria Nuland, bragged that they spent $5 billion creating anti-government and anti-Russia think tanks, which in fact were led by institutions like the Svoboda, the Right Sector, the Azov Brigade, Nazi organizations, proudly carrying the swastika, proudly carrying the picture of Stepan Bandera, who was Hitler's ally in Ukraine during the war, massacring Poles and Jews and so forth. This is what was done to overthrow the elected government of Ukraine, and then Russia was blamed. And massive sanctions were placed against Russia, diplomats exposed when silly things happened. You had the Skripal affair in England, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, where a Russian intelligence officer was turned, became a British spy, was caught, was put in prison, was interrogated, and then traded for a Russian spy in England. The Russians had no more interest in this man. And then he was recruited, we now know, by Christopher Steele, a name I hope you know. He is the MI6 author of the dossier, which has been used to demonize Trump, to accuse him of being a brainwashed puppet of Vladimir Putin. Completely false, acknowledged now as completely fake. This is the same Christopher Steele and his MI6 ally, Pablo Miller, who recruited Skripal in the first place. And then Pablo Miller went to live with him in Salisbury when he came to Britain after the exchange. That happens to be the town of Porton Down, the head of the Chemical Weapons Division for the British. The Russians had absolutely no reason to want to kill this man, although we now know that this man was working with Christopher Steele and with Pablo Miller in creating fake stories against Trump. Perhaps they had a reason to want to get rid of him. And he's been, of course, not seen since he recovered from this incident. So these are the so-called justifications for this hysteria. And why? The question has to be why. What's behind this? Well, what's behind it is that the British Empire, as Eliot referenced, has always been based on the ability to keep the world divided against itself in religion, ethnicity, but the most fundamental division, East versus West. The free world versus godless communism and various other things that have been used to describe it. And when Trump ran for president, saying it would be a good thing to be friends with Russia, not a bad thing, and other points at which he refused to go along with the policies that be, he became a target. Christopher Steele, for instance, had said, I will do anything to stop this man from becoming president, and once he became president, to overthrow him. The reason is that he is refusing to accept the division of the world, East and West. Whatever else you think about President Trump, that's the core of the reason. And I will mention that it's the same reason that the head of my organization, Lyndon LaRouche, was targeted by the same people, by the way, including Robert Miller, the man who's running the witch hunt against Trump, who ran the campaign against our organization back in the 1980s. And in fact, it was literally 30 years ago today, January 27th, 1989, that Mr. LaRouche and several of his associates, including myself, were marched off to prison under George Bush for the reason that they had to stop Mr. LaRouche's having successfully organized Ronald Reagan to call for collaboration with Russia on the development of space-based anti-missile systems and to do away with the mutual assured destruction game, which was, you can blow us up, we can blow you up, therefore we won't go to war. Well, fine, but that means the world remains permanently divided between warring sections. Mr. LaRouche said, no, we have to have a basis for bringing the world together around the frontiers of human knowledge, science and technology, and collaboration. And for that reason, he was targeted by the same people targeting Mr. Trump today. What about the Chinese side? I'm sure you've seen there's massive hysteria against China today. I won't go through it all, but it's China, again, like Russia, is being aggressive. Why are they being aggressive? Well, because they're building islands in the South China Sea, which I'm sure you all know, every war against China from the West came through the South China Sea. They have a very good reason for wanting to have that area defended. And in terms of freedom of navigation, which you hear all the time, 90% of the trade through the South China Sea is with China. They, more than anyone, need freedom of navigation. They don't need U.S. and British and French warships sailing through the region to assure freedom of navigation. So this is an artificial McCarthyite hysteria which is going on in the United States, which can and must be reversed. So all of this comes from the fact that the world is now very clearly divided between two paradigms that are extreme opposites. On the one hand, you have in the West a situation in which the financial system is in a state of general breakdown. The collapse in 2007 and 8, which Mr. LaRouche had forecast, was brought about by the fact that in the 1990s, the policies of Franklin Roosevelt, the separation of speculative banks and commercial banks, the Glass-Steagall Act, and other things were taken down, and unleashed was a massive amount of speculation centered in London and in Wall Street. That speculation led to a complete bubble which burst. Nothing was done to reverse the speculation, and we're now sitting on top of a bubble which is about half again bigger than it was in 2008. The result of this is that rather than addressing the actual austerity and breakdown of industrial development in Europe and America, tons and tons of money, trillions of dollars, were printed to bail out the gambling debts, to bail out the banks, at the expense of investments into the economy. And the result is that we've seen a deindustrialization of the United States. I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio, a very industrial city, which I worked in the steel mills during my college summer times. Gone, totally gone. Destitution in the Midwest of America, and generally across the United States. And as I'm sure you know, a drug epidemic unprecedented in history, where there's not a single family in this country, including probably your own, who has not had some person in the extended family who's been hit by this horrendous drugs epidemic, the president who wanted to legalize drugs, and so forth. So we've had then, over these last few years, the emergence of a true popular revolt against this austerity, against these conditions, which has created a condition now where, if you look at Europe, of course, in a certain sense, the vote for Brexit in England started this. This was a revolt against this effectively vicious austerity policy subjected on the British people, with the excuse that it was by Brussels, the unelected bureaucracy in Brussels, which were dictating this, therefore there was nothing that could be done about it. But they revolted. Yeah, thanks. I appreciate that. They revolted, and as you know, the situation now is just absolutely chaotic. I won't go into the details of that, but it's really astonishing. In France, you're watching, I think, the first real political mass strike in the modern era, sweeping across France. Why? Because vicious austerity has destroyed the potential of their working people. Their children have no future, just as today we see that our children are basically given a future or no future, which has turned them towards drugs. It's turned them towards other kinds of things. So you're seeing this kind of revolt. Germany, even Germany, the two parties that govern Germany since World War II have completely collapsed in the last two elections. Absolute revolt against the establishment, to the point where Merkel had to resign as head of her party, and she probably will have to resign as chancellor. There's some pockets of sanity. Italy, somewhat Spain and Portugal. These are the countries working with China on the New Silk Road, who are giving their populations an alternative to the kind of vicious austerity imposed by the EU dictatorship over those countries. And I would certainly argue that the election of Donald Trump, whatever you think of Trump, the election of Donald Trump was by a population which could no longer tolerate austerity, drugs, degenerate culture. Trump said, we're going to fix that. They said, good, let's give it a go. Now, he hasn't been able to be completely successful for many, many reasons. But this is what we're in that kind of a situation. So that's the one paradigm. And then the other paradigm, which is our subject here, and please excuse me, that it's not because I wrote this in 2006. I simply put the wrong date on. And it's January 27th. I should remember. It's 30 years since I was thrown into prison. So pardon the date. But this is the other alternative. This is the alternative. This is a policy, a global policy as we have fought for it, and increasingly the Chinese agree, which has the potential of transforming humanity. It's a paradigm which can, in fact, embrace all of mankind, not in a divided world, but in a world committed to the idea that there is such a thing as the common aims of mankind as a whole, what Xi Jinping calls a win-win in his policies. So I want to give you a little bit of a background on this, though, because as Elliot mentioned, we've been deeply involved in this process from the beginning. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, that period, Mr. and Mrs. LaRouche immediately said, okay, now we have to rebuild the Silk Road. We have to make sure that we not only end the Cold War, but end any chance that there will be global war in the future. How do we do that? We build development corridors connecting Europe and Asia. We open up the tremendous wealth in between in Central Asia and the Russian Far East through development corridors. This is the new Silk Road idea, and we immediately went to work to organize for that. What we found, unfortunately, in the US and Europe was that rather than saying, okay, the Soviet Union's gone, we don't need NATO anymore, well, we might as well get together and develop ourselves. Quite the opposite. They said, no, we need an enemy image. We have to keep the Soviet Union enemy image alive in Russia, and we have to keep NATO. They promised Russia they would not expand NATO, but as you know, they've now pushed it right up to the Russian border, which is causing incredible conflict and potential danger. So we went to Russia, too, and the Russians were being looted. And they were under Yeltsin, who was allowing the West to come in and take anything that wasn't nailed down. But we did find that the Russian Academy of Sciences had been carefully studying Mr. LaRouche's work for many years. They recognized in him somebody who had a concept of how real economics is the economics of the advancement of science and technology and productivity of the populations worldwide. And they looked to him. So we established close relations with key people. But the country was unable to act. The Chinese, on the other hand, were totally open to this idea. And I'm going to discuss that a little bit. But let me go ahead and go to the next slide. What the Chinese did is that, together with Mrs. LaRouche, they organized a huge conference in Beijing. This is the report that you see there, in 1996. And we produced over the next year a report that included the key speeches from that event and our plans for developing the entire world. And you'll see that the title was The Eurasian Land Bridge, the New Silk Road, Locomotive for Worldwide Economic Development. Worldwide. It wasn't just Eurasia. We had that concept from the beginning. But again, I'll say, Mr. LaRouche was not actually the first architect of the New Silk Road. Go to the next slide. That's Mr. LaRouche. This is Gottfried Leibniz. And Gottfried Leibniz was one of the leading inspirations for Mr. LaRouche's work when he was a young man. But among other things, besides having discovered the science of physical economy, of having discovered the calculus, and being a great statesman, Leibniz was in correspondence with the Jesuits in China, who had been translating the works of Confucius and Mencius and the brilliant genius of the Sung dynasty in the 12th century, Zhu Xi. And in reading that, he recognized a kindred spirit. And he began publishing some of the translations of the Confucian canon and discussing the question of China's culture and development. Go to the next slide. And I'm going to, can you move that over a little bit? I'm going to read this. You can read along. This is in the book Leibniz wrote called Novissima Sinica in the 1690s. It said, I consider it a singular plan of the fates that human cultivation and refinement should today be concentrated, as it were, in the two extremes of our continent, in Europe and in China, which adorns the Orient as Europe does the opposite edge of the earth. Perhaps supreme providence has ordained such an arrangement so that as the most cultivated and distant people stretch out their arms to each other, those in between may gradually be brought to a better way of life. I mean, can there be more beautiful expression of the New Silk Road concept, the idea of lifting the world as a whole through collaboration on development, science, technology, philosophy, culture? This is the key idea. Next slide. So this was the map we had in the very first of our land bridge books. You can see it's mostly Eurasia. And we were still thinking primarily of Eurasia to get this thing started. And we talked about the three routes, the northern route being the old Siberian Railroad, rebuilding that, the central route through Kazakhstan, which in fact the Chinese built over the next few years, very primitive format, different grades of railroad and no high-speed rail, but they began the process. And then we had the southern route, which still has many gaps, but the plan is there. And you notice we did not have, for instance, the CPEC, because we didn't have that in our minds at the time. Next. So then Xi Jinping came along. And as you know, in 2013, he announced the new economic the Silk Road economic belt for the overland and the 21st century maritime Silk Road for the through South China Sea into the Indian Ocean and into the Gulf and so forth. So we published in 2014 this document. This is the report here, called The New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge. And it was a message to the world and to the Chinese, too, that this had to be a world land bridge. Don't just think of Eurasia. You have to think of Africa, South America, and even the United States and Europe. This has to be a development process for mankind as a whole. And as you see, it was translated into Chinese by the Chinese. The first 1,000 copies was purchased by Renmin University and distributed to every think tank and government office in the country. They saw Mrs. LaRouche as the new Silk Road lady. They acknowledged her role in giving the spark to this idea, which brought it about. And she's been there many times now. She's interviewed by all of the major newspapers and TV and so forth as the Silk Road lady. It was translated by one of our associates into Arabic, where it was released in Egypt, in Yemen, throughout the Middle East. And it's now been translated into Korean, but it's not been released yet, and some other languages. So this was a major step towards bringing about this kind of process. The next slide. This is the map we had in that version of our land bridge report. And you can see we focused on the connections. Like, for instance, this here is a long-time plan that Mr. LaRouche has advocated for building a bridge or a tunnel over the Bering Strait, literally connecting Russia and the United States by rail. It's an idea that goes back to Abraham Lincoln. When they built the Transcontinental Railroad in the United States, his economist, Henry Carey, said, let's grid the world with iron. Let's build rail connections that connects the world. And if we also deal with what's called the Darien Gap between North and South America, where there's a swamp area that's never been developed, then you can go by rail from the tip of Argentina up into the U.S., Canada, Russia, China, all the way to Europe, down into Africa. I mean, this is the kind of concept you think about bringing the world together through this kind of science and technology. Next. So this is the report you've seen that's outside, the one we just published at the end of last year. This is volume 2, essentially, of the New Silk Road Becomes the World Land Bridge, with that subtitle, A Shared Future for Humanity. I mean, this is a direct polemic against geopolitics, against zero-sum games, against the idea that to get ahead you have to do it at the expense of the other, the imperial idea that man is essentially just a sort of talking animal that has to be treated with the powerful and the weak, the master and the slave. No, we have to address the human race as what it is. We have to have a higher concept of humanity, which has existed throughout history but has never become hegemonic. And if we're going to end war, if we're going to end the threat of a nuclear war or global economic disaster, it requires that we lift the human race out of this semi-brainwashed state of geopolitics, and that we focus on the fact that every single human being is born with that creative potential and capacity, which is what Leibniz meant when he talked about the pursuit of happiness that made it into the American Declaration of Independence. That pursuit of happiness is the ability to develop the mind and add something to posterity, which gives the true joy of being a human being, with great culture, great art, great science, and so forth. So go ahead. What's the next one? This is the map from this final version. You see it's far more expanded. We now do have the CPEC in there. And again, it's focused on the fact that there's no corner of the earth that cannot and must not be engaged in this process, including the United States, emphatically. And I'll come back to that for a minute. Now let me address just a couple of aspects of what has to be addressed if we're going to succeed in this. One of them is the so-called debt trap, which Pakistan has been subjected to as well. The argument is that the Belt and Road is just an imperial design meant to indebt countries which shouldn't be given access to these advanced kinds of infrastructure because it's too expensive and they're going to end up with debts that are too big, and then the Chinese are going to take over. I'm sure you've heard this, right? Now, I would argue that when you hear it, you are looking at advocates of the empire looking in a mirror and saying, that's what the Chinese are doing. Because, of course, that's what the colonial powers did. That's what the neo-colonial powers did. If you look at a map, we actually have one in the last version of the Silk Road book, a map of Africa, which, I should have brought this, it shows the railroads built by the colonial powers. All they are is the port to the mine, the port to the mine, the port to the mine. Get the raw materials out and to hell with anything else. You couldn't get from one country to another by rail, or even road in many cases. You couldn't get across the continent, right? Now we see huge developments, especially in Africa and in South America, transcontinental rail developments, mostly the Chinese, but not only the Chinese. The Japanese and even the Germans are involved in some of these things. But it was this impulse by the Chinese Belt and Road process coming straight from Mr. and Mrs. LaRouche, which is now giving hope to every country in Africa, every country in South America, that, especially Africa, that finally they can aspire to becoming modern nations, that, like China, lifted 700 million people out of poverty, and they hope to have the last 20 or 30 million by the end of next year. This is astonishing. And it's done through infrastructure. It's done not through debt, but as the Chinese, in fact, Justin Lin, Lin Yifu, was the chief economist at the World Bank for many years. He's now running an institute in China. But he said just the other day, he said, you know, the West spent billions and billions and billions of dollars helping the third world. Mostly it was in governance, how to be a good governant, right? Some education, some useful things. But what we found, he said, from our experience, is that it's infrastructure which is the bottleneck to becoming a true modern nation. And the line of the IMF and the World Bank for many, many years was, well, we have to have appropriate technologies. Your country isn't at the stage where we could build high-speed rail or nuclear power plants or infrastructure of that. We'll provide you with better picks and shovels. And this concept of appropriate technologies is the exact opposite of what's required and what is possible, and which we're committed to actually bringing about on a global basis. So I will end with that with two questions posed, hopefully for discussion afterwards. I'm not going to go into, go do the next slide. These are the 6 corridors, I should mention this. Besides the China Economic Corridor, the other 6 corridors for Eurasia, well, you can see them. There's the one in Southeast Asia, one that goes through Bangladesh, China, India, Myanmar, the China-Pakistan corridor, the one that goes down into Central Asia, the Mongolian corridor, and of course the Eurasian Land Bridge corridor, which is already functioning. Next one. And this is not our map. This is from the Pakistan government. This is the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, which Dr. Saba will address. So I don't have to do that. But let me leave 2 questions, which I'm sure you've all thought about one way or another. Is the Belt and Road adequate to bring about a true reconciliation between Pakistan and India? Now, you probably know that Modi would not join the Belt and Road because of his concern about the path going through the contested territory in Kashmir. But last July, and I'm sure you've seen this too, he went to China, not to the capital, not to Beijing, but he met with Xi Jinping in Wuhan, and they agreed that they would start working together on joint development projects in other countries, and especially in Afghanistan. There have been moves in Pakistan under Imran Khan to open up pathways between India and Afghanistan. These are difficult issues. But all of this is in the works. And as you probably know, Modi and Xi Jinping met 4 times last year on the sidelines of the G20 and the SCO and the BRICS. So, and he may be, Xi Jinping may be going to India next month. So this is in the process of happening. It's a question which is an open question. This is, as you know, this is a long-standing conflict. This is exactly what the British love to do, is leave someplace and leave it in a situation which will never be resolved, like the Palestine Jewish question, and like Korea was. Korea is now being resolved. You think about what's happened because Trump took this step in Korea, which he did with Russia and China, and Japan even, and North and South Korea. For the first time, I think, in history, all of the Asian countries are united around how do we bring about development throughout Asia, because we've resolved, potentially, this North Korea issue. This is the kind of thinking which is potential for the world as a whole. So I leave that as a question. The other question is, can we get the United States to join the Belt and Road? Well, it's not only a good idea, it's an absolutely essential idea. Trump has said he wants to do the right thing. He wants to rebuild American industry. He wants to rebuild American infrastructure. But he hasn't been able to do it, partially because he doesn't know how to finance it and because he hasn't been able to deal with the threat of a financial bubble, which, believe me, is a very real threat. And while the anti-China hysteria has actually stopped the Chinese from building infrastructure in the United States, which they want to do, if we implement LaRouche's program, which is basically a restoration of the American system economic policies, restore Glass-Steagall to stop the speculative banks from looting your savings and in speculating, and build what Hamilton called the National Bank of the United States. And we had 2 national banks, not central banks, not the Federal Reserve, but national banks which took in equity from private interests, but then issued credit in the name of the government, not borrowing it from bankers, but issuing credit with strings attached to rebuild the economy, industry, agriculture, schools, hospitals, and so forth. Right? That this concept was what built America. It's actually what is building China, and it built Japan and Korea, for that matter, this kind of centralized, directed credit policy. This is something that we can restore. And the Chinese are sitting on over $1 trillion in U.S. debt, which is returning them close to 0% interest, and which, if we built a national bank, a national infrastructure bank, the Chinese would be delighted to swap their U.S. debt for equity in an investment bank. And they would get a couple of % interest rates, and that money would be spent to rebuild the American economy. This is what we as an organization are fighting for, to try to convey to our friends in the government, Mr. Trump himself, our other friends like Roger Stone, who was given what I call the LaRouche treatment a few days ago. But these are very real issues that are solvable and can and must be solved over this coming period. So I leave that for discussion, and I thank you, and I'll turn it over to Dr. Saba. Sure.
Thank you, Mike. That was very, very informative. That was a very interesting discussion. Can I please have Mahina come up and give Mike our appreciation token?
Is this your cellist daughter?
Yes.
Are you going to perform a cello piece for us? No. Maybe next time.
Let's give Mike a second. Thank you. Now let me introduce our community's hidden, talented treasure, Dr. Farhad Saba. She's an extremely magnetic personality, well accomplished, a mother, and a personal dear friend. Dr. Saba is also one of the executive directors of the Institute of Research and Advocacy. She holds a PhD degree in international management. She is currently a professor of international business at the Murray Kopelman School of Business at the Brooklyn College. She frequently travels to Pakistan to fulfill her professorial responsibilities at the National University of Science and Technology, the NUS School of Business in Islamabad, Pakistan. Her expertise lies in cross-cultural management, behavioral sciences, and business communication. Dr. Farhad Sabah will speak on the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC prospects and challenges in the development of Pakistan. Please welcome Dr. Farhad Sabah.
Thank you very much, Madnia. Assalamu alaikum. Greetings to you all. Thank you very much for joining us. We are all here to create a healthy debate and discussion today. So it's a matter of creating a win-win situation here. We are here to discuss, not criticizing what China is doing, what America should be doing, what India is doing. We are all here to support China for creating or giving us, the whole world, an opportunity of network and connection, basically. So my area basically is Pakistan, but I'm going to brush up quickly whatever has been discussed by Mike. I have lots of slides. I want you all to engage in my lecture, so I'll be asking you questions to help you to just, engage in this discussion. So I don't want this one-way kind of a discussion. I don't want to make it a boring discussion at all. So what I'm going to do, sometimes I'm going to ask you or request you to just be involved in this discussion. We are here not to list the problems related to the CPEC or what are the opportunities. You know more than me. You already know CPEC is around, and after 2 years of successful completion of first phase, we can say that China has been successful in connecting the whole world and involving Pakistan and giving it a very strategic importance in this whole concept of One Belt, One Road initiative through CPEC. So let's quickly have a look. I have lots of slides, but quickly I'm going through the slides and asking you to help me to come up with the argument and discussion. And everything I'm discussing today is being backed up with the research, and I have my references at the back. Whatever I'm discussing is coming from the good peer-reviewed literature, published articles, and high-quality journal articles, basically. So it's not from newspapers. It's not from my opinion being from the northern areas of Pakistan. It's not your opinion from Punjab being related to KPK or Balochistan. We are not discussing every division which is creating a conflict here. Together as a Pakistani, all of us, we are here to discuss what are the options, what are the challenges, and what is the way forward. So we're more interested in karna kya hai is important than what is happening. We know that it's happening, guys, it's happening. Aap agree kare ya na kare, it's there. CPEC is there. 2 years of successful completion. Gwadar port is being happening. International airport has been developed. KKH. I'm from the northern areas of Pakistan. I know literally from the inside. I'm giving you the updated information. It's functional. So starting from the Shandur top or from the Gwadar, what do you call that top? Punjab top. You can call it, some people from this perspective, people call it the exit point. For me, it's the entry point in Pakistan from China, where we are bordering China's Xinjiang province in the Kashgar. So starting from the Kashgar, we are going through the different provinces in the Pakistan and going to end up in the Gwadar city of Balochistan, that how it's working, what are the things. So whenever I know that you guys are more informative or you have more information than me, I am going to or requesting Madnia to go quickly with the slides. And some of the slides I have given you the handouts as well. So I want you to have a look and help me to come up with some kind of conclusion, some kind of consensus. That's important for us as a Pakistani. we have to work at this stage. We have to come working together, helping each other to have the consensus. Please, we have to leave the differences alone now. It's a time to move on with the prospects, with the challenges. How are we going to overcome them is the big question now. So let's quickly have a look. This is all already been discussed in the first presentation. So 2 things important in this One Belt, One Road initiative. Belt means for the whole Silk Road economic belt. So it's the land and the sea routes. It's the land, road through the red is the, I think, it's the road. It's the belt for the and then the maritime Silk Road is for the sea and for the other part of the world. So what we are going to discuss here is through One Belt, and I call it OBER. So One Belt, One Road initiative is basically better infrastructure, connectivity to help for the economic development, basically. So to sum up, if you go to the next slide, it's very important why I have just listed some of the very important things. This initiative is very important, that has basically started in 2003, is very important for the whole world. Why? Because it's connecting more than 60 countries. Okay, so more than 60 countries, about 65 of the global population in one way or another way, or directly or indirectly, going to be affected by this project. Total economic value of more than 21 trillion, 63% of that is basically the whole, and 29% respectively of the whole world income is basically through this project. We are going to be, you can say that it's 40% of the total GDP of the whole world. So it's a big, huge, has lots of potential, not only for Pakistan, not only India, not Afghanistan, Iran, Kars, Central Asian republics, Russia. Every country, every region has a positive role to play in this initiative, and every so you can see I have given the handout of this slide to you to know that how many countries. You have to have a quick detail on Europe is being involved, Central Asia, Middle East and South Asia, then Southeast Asia connecting with Australia and the Far East countries as well. So it's more than 65 countries so far. It is going to be, as Mike has shown you in one of the slides, that it's basically connecting the whole world. This connectivity, this economic development is for the whole humanity, for the whole, so it's very important. So let's take it as important as it is, basically. So the background is basically the revival of the Silk Road. The Silk Road is there for more than nearly 600 years. It has been used for just exporting or exchange of trades and goods in simple words. So it has been more than 600 years. Now, with this One Belt, One Road initiative, that's now has been changed to Belt Road initiative, is basically a revival of the whole Silk Road. So that's how they are going to reviving. Next. It's a very important point to mention here. For me, it's basically 2 important things. If you look for the keywords, world leadership and the currency standards. So for China, this is very important. Through this, China is making a very positive and vibrant role in the world of globalization, basically. If you, Nadia, can you go to the next slide, where I can tell you that, to me, it's an indication of Chinese new inclusive approach to globalization. So when we say that it's inclusive approach to globalization, we are involving each and everybody in this process of economic development through connectivity and sharing, basically. So we are here sharing goods and services, exchanging goods and services, but the benefits of whatever we're getting from the business, international business, is being shared by your positive participation in this initiative. That's, to me, it's so I want you to join me in congratulating China for coming up with a kind of huge initiative. And there are more to come through, like as Mike discussed, that there are more corridors they are going to build on. So this opportunity, these are not only linked to CPEC and China, India, Afghanistan, or some of the neighboring countries' cars, but there are more to come, because United States has to play a very proactive and a positive role in this. At the moment, United States is not directly involved, but indirectly, because all the good allies of United States are part of this project, like Pakistan, India, Afghanistan, one way or another way, directly or indirectly, we are involved in this business. So once we are in, it means indirectly United States is interested. They are interested, they are involved. So that's how. So to sum up the whole thing, it's basically improving through economic growth, offering trade diversifications, investing in transportation. So the whole concept is basically a mixture of road, mixture of some of this railways, microfiber, energy projects, telecommunication, IT-related stuff. So it's through these kind of initiative, it's basically connecting the whole regions around China, or around that belt, basically. Okay, so just to give a brief discussion on how this whole One Belt, One Road initiative is basically through the three routes, you can say. South, I don't want to go into the details of these. So these are the three different corridors through which this whole initiative is going to be materialized, and we are part of one of it's the first corridor that's called the Southern Corridor. So let's go to the details of the CPEC and how it's affecting us like people coming from Pakistan. We are here representing Pakistan as a one Pakistan. We are not representing Punjab's Pakistan, Afghanistan, or Balochistan, Sindh, KPK, or nothing else. So together, we are going to have a look through this lens. We are going to have a look at what are the options here for us to explore. Let Punjab to grow first. We are going to be next anyway. So let's do it this way. Why not to look in a different light? It's a win-win kind of a thing. Ultimately, we are all going to take the benefits of CPEC. That's what for sure. Okay, so next, it's basically the revival of the Silk Road. So to achieve the regional stability, so here in this region, we're going to add this word on now. Stability and peace is important, because there are so many conflicts going on. There are so many conflict of interest, divergent concerns, and things going on. So this region has always been a source of conflict for the whole world. So that's why we want to mention that this project is not only for economic development, but peace and stability of the whole region is important and linked with CPEC and the successful implementation of CPEC, basically. Okay, so economic integration, and then how? Let's go to the next. So through land and through the ocean, two routes we're going to take. CPEC has got a status. Now, we all know that some people say it's a game changer. Some people say it's a fate changer. To me, it's basically a difference maker. You are going to see a new Pakistan, literally a new Pakistan. I believe in me, it's going to be a different Pakistan in a matter of not 10 years, but in a matter of within 5 years. You're going to see things are happening in the Gwadar port. Things are happening, going in the right direction in Balochistan province. You know that has been the troubled province in terms of problems and internal insecurities. We're going to see something first time happening for Gilgit-Baltistan, because it's a disputed area within a Pakistan, and international development, peace, prosperity, or international economic development is not justified when an area is disputed. It's China's point of view as well, but that's with the Chinese concern and with the CPEC's pressure, first time in history after independence that government of Pakistan is thinking about giving northern areas or Gilgit-Baltistan legal status. So say it's like a provisional province or a constitutional province, but guys, we have started the process now. We are in the making of giving it a legal status, and this is a big achievement to me, belonging to that part of the world, coming from northern areas of Pakistan, Gilgit-Baltistan. This is something I think it's a big achievement, and it's because of the CPAC, basically. Okay. So I'm going to quickly go through, because I know you guys know more than me about what it's bringing to us, like railroads, pipelines, communication, fiber. This is not a concern. We know that it's in written, everything has been happening. But let's quickly go to the areas where we have to stop, have a discussion, consensus, and move on. Have a plan to move forward in a right direction, basically. Let's have a look. Okay, so 3 different, it's basically the project has been divided into these 4 phases. You know that early harvest phase is almost complete. This phase was basically more with the infrastructure development, KKH upgradation for Karakoram Highway, making some like technically infrastructure development in Balochistan and in the Gwadar port and things like that. So this first phase, the harvest phase, has been complete 2 years, and we have seen the success. It's there. So we have now entered into this short-term phase. That is the next phase of the CPAC. It's going to be completed by 2020, and here we are more going to be seeing new project in the area of energy, and some more infrastructure development is going to happen. Then the third phase is going to be the midterm, which is going to be complete by 2025. In this period, we are going to have some very, very important development in terms of special economic zones, special economic areas or hubs. That is that is going to be a bit challenging, but China has been successful getting the goals and objectives for the economic development through its own special economic zones. So we are very much hopeful with the assistance and direction from China, we will be able to make the 9 proposed special economic zones throughout the Pakistan, and more than 22 are coming, and it's in the pipeline. The last phase is basically about the long term. That is going to be completed by 2030. This is basically more about the functional and institutional and the operationalization of the railways. And you know that the railway is going to be from Gwadar to Kashgar, so it's going to be really challenging, looking for the diversity in the geography, going through the mountains, deserts, and you know that Pakistan is very rich in terms of its own geography and in a harsh terrain, basically. So this is what the whole picture of this corridor's economic development and the ideas being happening in. So starting from the Khunjar up top, we are going to have one special economic zone for sure in GB, Gilgit-Baltistan as well. And there are some other things going on, but the development of the Karakoram Highway, you know, it's one of the wonders of the world, because it's through the highest peaks like K2, Himalayas, Hindu Kush. So we live in the high peak and very, very, very challenging mountainous region we are dealing with, from Kashgar till when you enter into Basham, from where KPK starts basically, and then from KPK to you enter into Punjab. So we are going to be integrating every province through this transportational development. You know that it's very important for Pakistan that we are connecting Pakistan through roads, through railways, through the transportational and developed transportational system, basically. So it's not only making so far we have a 1 or 2 road KKH. That is a big challenging for China to moving goods and services or big lorries and trucks from Kashgar to Gwadar, but it's this project, and the second or the third extension phase is going to work on that as well. But it's a blessing in disguise in this time when we are living in a 21st century, dealing with IT, information technology, information age, and some of the areas in Gilgit-Baltistan and from where the CPAC starts, we don't have electricity there. So CPAC is bringing a new life, new dimension to each and every one, no matter what level of development your province is. If Punjab is doing well, but you're going to be doing much better than whatever you're doing it through CPAC. Sindh is going to be developed further. Balochistan is going to start and play a positive role in this development. And then we are together, everybody is being involved with the positive hope, basically. So it's so many projects, I don't want to go into details. This is basically the initial, the whole package was $46 billion agreement, but now it has been, that the updated information is that it's more than 60 billion now. So it's increasing, guys, with every developed phase and with the promising attitude from Pakistan, different provinces and from different governments, because we know that there are so many problems, internal problems, and one of the very important internal problem is that we have inconsistency of our own political system, basically, the internal problems I'm talking about. So we don't have any prime minister in the history of Pakistan that has completed the term successfully, except, and not for more than 5 years. So this economic or this political instability in Pakistan is a huge concern for the successful implementation of CPAC. Let's have a quick look. So this is the breakdown of the whole $62 billion so far and how they are spending it on different types of projects. So 65% is going to be on energy and energy-related problems. And you know that here we are also in Pakistan, we are all split on kind of what kind of energy projects we are going to have, and coal has been, why coal and why not coal, but still it is very important. The energy development is very important for us because we are going through energy crisis in Pakistan, literally. You have witnessed it. So Gawadar is almost complete, and Gawadar 2% is like in Gawadar, basically, if you want me to touch upon Gawadar port has been properly developed, and 40 years China has taken the whole Gawadar for economic development and technological development, but the International Gawadar Airport is in the process of making, and for other infrastructure developments, they are still in progress, basically. So, let's go to. So by 2030, when we complete the fourth phase of CPAC, this is going to be the new Pakistan with the much improved and advanced transportation and telecommunication facilities. Although we have, this is kind of development, we are connecting to the different parts of the world, so connectivity is being improved and increased through connectivity and through connections. It means we are bringing international business to Pakistan. When we are bringing international business to Pakistan, means more economic activity, more jobs are coming in. So when jobs are coming in, the cycle of the development actually kicks off and starts. So where is the new Pakistan gone? Okay, so the only one thing, and I'm not very, very conscious about this point, but I'm going to raise it here, that social development, if it's being very quick in terms of going towards learning Chinese and helping, understand Chinese culture. So this is happening as well. So social change is coming in Pakistan as well. So all of our universities has opened the Chinese language department and institution. Even in Gilgit-Baltistan, Karakoram University has opened a new language department. They are teaching English language or Chinese language, not only at the university level, but at the school level as well. So young kids are learning Mandarin, their language, and there is a cultural, you can say that it's not kind of influenced, but in a way we are going to be influenced by Chinese culture as well. So this is happening. It's not economic development, but the social change is coming as well in the fabric of Pakistan, new Pakistan. We have to be really carefully handling these things, Okay, next slide. Okay, why? Because of the unique strategic position of Pakistan, nobody has given us this opportunity, or nobody has favored us. This is our own unique position that CPEC has come to us. So we as a Pakistani should be proud of whatever we are. We are Pakistani, we are originally from Pakistan, or we belong to this part of the world where we are going to be positively involved now with the help of China. No terrorism, no conflict, no regional. We are going to be creating positive economic relationship. A new history, is going to be start through. So it's a big opportunity for Pakistani, for us. Okay, so two important points I want to make. What do you want to say? What are the other blessings of CPEC? Other than bringing projects, economic development, what? Can you go back to the slide? We're going to stop here for a while. Any guesses, guys? What else? Something new from CPEC. If you know, can you please share with me?
You're sharing already.
No, I'm telling what is, but anything new. I'm very excited to share two new points. It's not new, but to me, they are very important. Anything I'm missing here?
I think this is very good for Pakistani perspective. For American perspective, it appears that it's one way going in favor of China.
Okay.
And we are about 25, 30 years from a global village.
Well, already,
how do we defend, as an American, this project or any other project China is proceeding forward with?
Okay, as an American, very important question, but let me finish the part I'm presenting as a Pakistani. When I come to that part where I'm presenting the United States perspective, I'm going to answer that question. So far, it's still two new things on Pakistan's, what are the things like economic development, connectivity, transportation, railroads, and things like that. What else? What else? Yes.
Are you taking questions or just?
I'm asking your opinion. Discussion.
I have few questions to ask.
Oh, no question, just the discussion.
Well, you say you are asking opinion.
Yes, opinion. What else? What else?
We don't know.
Okay. We got someone. If you go to the next slide, we got someone with us in this fight of terrorism. We were alone fighting with the conflicts, with the international, national, with India, with Afghanistan. Yes, please. You want to say something?
Yeah, hi. I'm Tahan, an TV producer. I would like to ask about involving the youth, especially now with ISIS is growing and engaging a lot of youth. So in terms of creating businesses, you need stability. So tell me.
Yeah. We're going to come to this point when we are going to discuss what CPEC has for youth, Pakistani youth, when we are involving them, when we are bringing them into this economic development. Of course, we have to make them skillful to be a vibrant part of this whole economic activity. What institutions are doing in Pakistan, especially in the capacity building, what universities are doing, what other institutions are doing. We are also working on that. To me, two important things I want to. In this fight of terrorism, we have got China on our back now. We have created the whole by being part of this scheme, by being part of CPEC. Now China has the exactly same stakes as Pakistan when fighting the terrorism. So it's a win-win situation for Pakistan that China is a big ally, supporter of Pakistan, helping Pakistan to fight against this thing. It's a big achievement for Pakistan. So when China is there, and you know that after the start of the CPEC, you have not seen like internal stability is there. Otherwise, there were so many problems and we were busy fighting with each other as a Pakistan. Okay, go to the next. The second point is that we're going to settle down the dispute, the long-standing dispute between India and Pakistan over Kashmir or over the disputed territory of northern areas, Gilgit-Baltistan. Gilgit-Baltistan is not a part of Kashmir, not a part of India. It's a disputed territory, and we have decided ages ago through the courts that we are going to join Pakistan, and government of Pakistan is going to decide by giving us a legal status. That's what decided. Now quickly come to the problem, some of the other problems. Okay, so now, next, come to the challenges, Maria. Okay, some internal challenges. I have already discussed that terrorism is going on, some of the other institutional problems, but I want to mention some of the political unrest, social security situation, and administrative issues. So we should, as a Pakistani, should ask ourselves, are we ready? Are we properly equipped? Do we have the capacity and the capability to handle the project, or can get the benefits of the high-end, like very technical and very sophisticated projects coming in through CPAC in the areas of energy, microfiber? Do Pakistani youth, as you mentioned, or we have the capabilities or skills to get the full benefits of it? It's a big question for us. We still are going into the process of helping the capacity building, helping the skill development, helping the youth to be properly channelized, properly placed in some of the universities in Pakistan, or vocational and training programs related to, like for example, in Karakoram University, they have opened up vocational and training services where they are equipping new students with the skills required for the special economic hubs in Gilgit-Baltistan. Exactly the same kind of institutes are being developed in Gwadar Port as well, to help youth know what are the required skills to be part of that part of according to the requirement, basically. So it's happening, it's being in the process of developing, and we are all into it. Let's have a quick look on what are the internal problems. And these are the big challenges. If we get rid of those challenges, we are making sure here that the implementation of CPAC is going to be successful within the time frame. Otherwise, you know that there are so many external and internal assumptions there that it's not going to be successful. And guys, we have to make it successful together. Let's quickly have a look. Number one, rule of law. We are still struggling with the kind of rules and regulations going on. Our courts, our different political legal institutions are not yet developed or not at par with whatever is happening in China. You know, this is kind of a partnership going on between, people call it a completely uneven partnership, like between the world's second largest economy and a very developing economy like Pakistan, having so many internal problems. So we're going to have inadequate, bad international law and order in Pakistan. You know, if we have to bring international business to Pakistan, we have to work on this and overcome its security challenges. So in this area, China can help us to have our situation better with India as well, as a game changer. Number two, lack of political consensus. Punjab is getting more. Sindh is being neglected. Balochistan doesn't want, because there are separatist movement going on in Balochistan, things like that. We have to, our government and our political and legal institution has to play a positive role to bring us together and keeping us and moving us in the right direction. I'm quickly going through because I think. So next is, we are fighting on the division of resources. We are fighting on the selection of routes, like the timing of the route. Why has can you go to some people call it, go back. Some people call it, it's not China-Pakistan economic corridor. It's basically China-Punjab economic corridor, because Punjab is getting more or bigger portion, and government has started developing the eastern route first rather than the western route. So these are the things internally, we are being busy fighting each other and trying to put hurdles in the process of development. This route has all longer or it's costlier, yes, I know, but Western route has so many security issues, and we need not only the route development, but we need sophisticated security equipment as well. This is going to be really costly, but it's also in the process of happening, basically. So these are the kind of things Pakistanis are busy with, fighting for the routes, fighting for the resources, and having like discontentment, dissatisfaction because of that. So the divergent interest, your part, my part, you Punjabi, I'm Sindhi, Gilgiti, this is something not new in the Pakistan's political economy. So this is a time, because I think this is once in a lifetime opportunity. I can tell you and assure you as an expert in international business that these things are opportunities, don't come every next day. They don't knock at your door every time. So when they come, we have to be together and prepare our whole, like being a support in the system to help and exploit the things in a positive way. I have to stop? I'm happy to stop. Always. Okay, so if you go to the next, I'm stopping anyway.
No questions?
No questions. So I am going to touch upon the Afghanistan card, I think, through the question answer session. I have 2 slides on the American stance and Americans' role in CPAC as well. I'm very positive about America and its role as a superpower, I know. So let's stop here and then let's see if my slides will help us to answer you guys when you ask us.
Thank you very much.
Lovely presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Farad Sabah. Can I please have Saida Bano, one of our eminent young leaders, to come and present our appreciation token to Dr. Sabah. Dr. Sabah, 1 second. Can you? Yeah, she'll stand here.
Thank you very much.
How are we doing with the attention span? Yes. No. I would like to introduce Mr. Khalid Azam. At this point, he's an eminent lawyer in the Pakistani American community. He's one of the team members of IRA. He's the executive director and the legal advisor of IRA. Mr. Azam, please come up and give us some final thoughts and conclusion remarks. Conclude the meeting, yes. Please conclude the meeting for us.
Assalamu alaikum, good evening, all my friends and guests. I will say only very few things because I think the time is running out, and excuse my throat because of my voice. I will say human race and human souls of all ages have been in search of peace. And let me tell you, muscles cannot bring peace, whether it is an individual level or whether it is a national level, although muscles can bring fear and silence. What we have seen is that all the efforts we should now concentrate how we can achieve peace. The idea of one belt, one road is towards achieving a peace through development and sharing the development of fruits of the developments for all the people in the world. That is the reason they did not concentrate on one side, the OBA or One Belt, One Route is concentrating through more than about 65 countries in the world. And I think we should support that idea wherever there will be some differences, although there will be countries who will still not accept it. But I think through the institutes like Schiller Institutes and other similar institutes, I must commend their work, and they should continue to do that work toward convincing those countries who are not in favor of those type of projects which has been started under the name of One Belt, One Route. So I believe we should all commend Schiller Institute, and we appreciate Mr. Michael Billing and Elliot, and I think we should all give a big hand of clapping to Schiller Institute's efforts. And hopefully, with all these efforts, which we will periodically make with cooperation with the Schiller Institute as well as IRA, which should not be confused with the Irish Republican Army. And the good news is, ultimately they also realized peace is the way, and it's not now that IRA which is fighting. They have also come to the terms of the peace. And latest news which is coming from the Afghanistan side is that America and the Taliban have agreed on some sort of a peace terms, which is a good news for the humanity. So as I said in the beginning, muscles cannot bring the peace, but it may bring fear and silence. And I think we should convince the people of the muscles that instead of using those muscles, they should concentrate on the efforts of developments and giving back those fruits of the developments to all nations in the world. Thank you very much.
Now we can open, thank you, Mr. Azam. Now we can open the floor for question and answers. So we have one mic that we can rotate. No, I need your help, Rana, to rotate the mic, please.
Are there some questions?
Yes.
Some comments?
I have a question for Mr. Mulungwar.
I'm Dr. Gilani. I have a question to Dr. Farhat.
Okay.
How should you compare CPAC with the Suez Canal in Egypt, Panama Canal in Panama?
CPAC is more in literally circles compared with BRICS and CPAC's role in economic and connectivity. Yes, we can compare, but CPAC is basically here whatever we are discussing it with CPAC and its economic development to Pakistan. So it's bringing prosperity. It's sharing the through connectivity, connecting different regions, different areas that should be connected in a way that we are sharing prosperity to bringing and uplifting the whole humanity, basically. So the basic aim and the concepts by sharing and caring and bringing everything together for development and uplifting the whole thing is basic phenomena, but the comparison I think is with the Suez Canal, because CPAC is coming through not only sea routes, or it's a collection of so many things. So canal or the one you mentioned, that it was the kind of the same thing in ages ago in other times of the world. CPAC is in the 21st century. CPAC is in the in the time when we're dealing with information age. CPEC is in a time when we're dealing with technology. There are so many things through technology, through connectivity, through IT. It's a different world. It's two different times we are going to have a comparison. But the basic aim, the concept, of connectivity, economic prosperity, development, and betterment of the humanity or people who are related to these two areas. To me, yes.
I can add briefly to that. Let me just point out that as very much part of the Belt and Road, El-Sisi in Egypt called for the expansion of the Suez Canal and said, when his advisors were saying it'll take 2 to 3 years, he said, one. And it was done in 1 year by Egyptians. So this is the kind of impulse that the Belt and Road is providing to the world. We're fighting now to build the Kra Canal in southern Thailand, which our organization has been involved in since the 1980s. But finally, there's a new king, there's going to be an election, and our organization in Thailand is now very optimistic that finally, after several hundred years, the Thais are actually going to go ahead with a tremendous development there that would link the Pacific and the Indian Ocean in a way which has never been done before, bringing in Sri Lanka, India, Pakistan, the Gulf. So these connectivity processes are spurring the world to this kind of optimism. And one gentleman was already asking.
Okay, my name is Shahnawaz Khan. I have a question with you. As you said in your talk, that India and China is meeting separately for the Afghanistan. Why they're meeting separately? As we know, India is responsible for disturbance in Balochistan.
Well, the reason that India feels, and I'm not justifying this, I'm just saying this is the fact, that because of the contested region in Kashmir, they feel like they cannot say, Modi cannot say, with his own base and so forth, cannot say, I'm joining the Belt and Road. But he wants to participate in this process, which goes beyond just the projects listed under the Belt and Road. This is an impulse in the world which Modi wants to be part of. And I think that's the impulse which is the basis upon which some potentially reconciliation of that entire region is possible. Sir? Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, excuse me. Sorry.
My name is Mahmoud Malik. I'm an affiliate of Defense University, Pakistan, a student of geostrategic relations. Looking at One Belt, One Road doctrine, the Chinese doctrine as such, looking at it through the American prism, what are the main geopolitical and geostrategic challenges America is afraid of joining this big initiative?
Well, I think what you said is exactly the problem. It's geopolitics. Geopolitics is a term developed by Mackinder and the British Empire in order to affix the idea that there is no such thing as a common aims for mankind. That there was only us versus them, existentialist man thrown into the world to fight against the others, might makes right, and so forth. We know that from the history of the British Empire. It's not gone. The British Empire did not die. It has not become an American empire. The problem is that in America, we have increasingly, since the death of Franklin Roosevelt, and especially since the assassination of John Kennedy, we have been increasingly governed by a British ideology. The Wall Street has said there must be free market, free trade, which translates into there must be no government direction to development. And as a result, we've seen the massive financial bubble, the speculative binge of these major banking institutions, which diverted money from the development of the real economy into the kind of speculative bubble that led not only to 2008's collapse, but which is leading now to a collapse far, far greater. And I'm sure if you read the financial press, even in the UK, you know that people are aware that this thing is about to blow apart. There's not a lot of time with which to revive what was well known as the American system, which governed this nation under key periods of our development, under our founding fathers, Alexander Hamilton, under John Quincy Adams, under Abraham Lincoln, who used greenbacks against all the advice of the British to win the Civil War against the South, which was backed by the British. And it was this idea of generating credit with strings attached, right, which people who advocate the British free market, free trade, imperial geopolitics model say, oh, no, that's socialism. Well, I don't think the founding fathers of the United States were socialist. I don't think that term applies. I think we're dealing here with a battle between an American system which values the human being and the creative powers of the human being through science, through technology, and through culture, as opposed to so-called freedom, which is libertarianism, to allow the banking powers, which are sitting on top of a bankrupt bubble right now, and who insist that that bubble be born to be bailed out, even if it means massive cuts in production, in wages, in infrastructure, in health care, and so forth. That's the fight. So the reason we have a problem in the United States is that we have succumbed to this British ideology of libertarianism, which includes this insane idea of legalizing drugs. But remember the drug opium wars that the British waged throughout history. It's the same battle today.
Do you, in any case, under any circumstances, dedicate it to fake capitalism also?
Meaning?
Fake capitalism is something that diverts the attention of the free economy and the free trade.
I think the word capitalism has many, many different interpretations, as does the word socialism. And in a certain sense, we have found, and Mr. LaRouche has always argued this, that you're better not to say I'm on this side or that side of the so-called capitalist versus socialism fight, because the distinction is what I just presented. It's a battle in the West between a British system which justifies freedom to trade in drugs, to trade in slavery, to trade in the looting of developing sector countries, and an American system. Remember when at the end of World War II, Franklin Roosevelt, towards the end, and his son wrote a book about this, went to Winston Churchill and said, Winston, we're not fighting this war to save your damn empire. And Winston Churchill said, over my dead body. And unfortunately, Roosevelt died. And Truman was a weak person, a puppet of Wall Street, actually. And instead of doing what Roosevelt wanted to do, which was to use this tremendous productive power that he'd built before the war, during the 1930s, he took a country in total depression, and he said, we're going to drive credit into rebuilding the infrastructure, build up our schools and our hospitals, and a productive machine, because he knew a war was coming, rebuilt our industries, and when the war came, we were capable of having this arsenal of democracy that was able to defeat fascism and Japanese militarism. But he died. And instead, we turned our military over to the British and the Dutch and the Portuguese, and they returned to their colonies. And we had 30 years of unnecessary, horrible warfare in Indonesia and Southeast Asia and Africa, which was unnecessary. If we had followed through on Roosevelt's understanding of an American system, which believed in developing the world as a whole using American system methods. We've lost the American system in this country. It's there, it's in people's hearts and souls, and we have to drag that out. We use culture. The reason this chorus is so important, and any of you, please join our choruses. These are community choruses, because participating in beauty uplifts the soul. And if you do that, people begin to think about not being pessimistic or paranoid, but to begin thinking about how can we bring the world forward now at this moment of crisis in civilization.
And just looking at the bright picture, this is the stance.
Yes,
I have a next question. My name is Sayyid Adnan Bukhari. I'm an environmentalist. First of all, I would like to say thank you to Institute of Research and Advocacy for bringing this, informative session to the community, and thanks to all the speakers for sharing their valuable, knowledge with us. My question is, since I'm from environmental background, I have several years of working for New York City compliance and environmental research and development. Dr. Sabha has mentioned so many lagging and leading indicators of this project, which is very pleasing. Definitely that will bring a lot of prosperity and socio-economic development in the country, country like Pakistan, which has a lot of challenges. I will play devil's advocate right here. The security issue is a hoax. Pakistan never had any security issues that have been created. You may agree or disagree. My question is that in your slides, I have been, following this project, not for too long, but I have never found anywhere any study done by any NGO or government organization on environmental impact of this project.
Yeah.
Pakistan, as we know that Pakistan is already had a lot of challenges, including depletion of water resources. UN issued their study that Pakistan is one of the leading countries going to suffer because of water resources are depleting. I think it's the third or fourth country in that region. So that being said, would you have any, would you be able to identify the impact of this project, environmental impact of this project? Thank you.
Yeah, especially I'm very concerned with the environmental impact of it because it's going to impact my area more than any other part of Pakistan. Here I'm saying my area means Gilgit-Baltistan. So it's not only environmentally, like that the only water. It's not only the water crisis we are going to go through. It's other things related to, like, that this area is, take the example of Gilgit-Baltistan. This area is famous for tourism, lots of mountains, trees and things like that. If you ever, Aga Khan Rural Support Program. Recently, they have organized an international conference in Hunza, Gilgit-Baltistan, a very good, very famous region, and they have discussed the different implications of environmental damage and environmental impact of this project in Pakistan. So there are so many things going on as far as environmental damage is concerned, because that transportation, that through going through different kind of environmental impacts, like this project is more or less construction, transportation, telecommunication and things like that. So we're dealing with not only water crisis, we're dealing with pollution, we're dealing with noise as well, we're dealing with depletion of resources like trees and like greenery and everything. So kind of not officially not a single study has been done, or maybe has been like to make the dams in northern areas of Pakistan we have done, particularly related to the area of making dams and energy projects in Pakistan. But overall, we are still in the making of coming up with research and development and new equipping the institution that how to deal with this problem. The problem is there, you're right, you have mentioned it, that we have to tackle it in a right way, otherwise we are going to be facing, especially Gilgit-Baltistan, when then every second there is a lorry or a truck going crossing the mountains, carrying goods and services. It's not only the pollution, sound, and dust and other things, but there are so many things socially, and it can, like talking about the impact on the villages of who are near to the belt, the Karakoram highway. So yeah, it's a big issue, big problem, but still technically not even government of Pakistan or not any institution, any think tank or any NGO has come up with substantial work or research on this issue. I think people are working on it, but it's a big issue, and we have to work with the help of American think tank, with the help of developing countries. But there are issues going on, and we are in the process of coming up. Do you know anything related to environment? If you guys help us, yeah, we are in the process. Yep. Question? Thank you very much. Yep.
My name is Marty Rowland. I also work for the City of New York, the Parks Department. I've been doing environmental engineering for about 40 years. So if you need any assistance on looking at studies, what you need to do is I'm available. I go back to 1975 with the Schiller Group, and back then it was the International Development Bank which grabbed me and got me involved in the organization. But there are two things I wanted to point out that I thought it was excellent what we saw today was not only the overall picture, but you got into some detail about the challenges at the start. And I think the most important thing about, that you might want to elaborate on is we don't, well, the process, the project doesn't need to succeed because it's already done. It has to succeed at the beginning, and it has to be turning a profit as you go. So you can't have this sunk investment, trillions of dollars, and hoping that it someday breaks even. So making progress successful as you go. The last one is I'm also on the board of the Henry George School of Social Science, and one of the important things about development corridors is that you want to make sure that the authority that's governing this thing retains ownership of the land underneath that corridor, so you don't get subverted by private interests that might jack up the rents because of, they own it. So keeping the authority in ownership of the land so they can plow back the investment and the rents that are generated back into the economy.
Let me answer the second part of that question, if I may. The question of the profitability of infrastructure. One of the arguments that they use in the so-called debt trap argument is that these investments are too big for these countries to handle. And in fact, the case used often is the Sri Lanka port, which they built the port, and it was not profitable because the business did not pick up. There was a slowdown in the world economy. And they blamed China for taking over the port by leasing it, and said this is part of the Chinese effort to take over the world. No, China took over the debt. They basically said, we can absorb the losses on this wonderful port, which in the long term is going to be one of the most productive things in the entire region, especially if you get the Kra Canal and you get Pakistan's Gwadar port. That Sri Lanka interface will massively boom. And the problem with the British system versus the American system that I've said is that the British ideology is you must have a profitable return on everything you invest. That's not true with infrastructure. The return does not come in short-term profits from tolls or something. It comes from lifting, through new technologies and new infrastructure, you lift the productivity not only of the people in your area but of the whole world. This is the concept of real progress, the idea that it's the creative powers of man to discover his laws of the universe and to apply them through machine tools and through this kind of infrastructure development where you create a different environment in which the profit comes from economic development. And you can say, well, taxes are increased and these kinds of profits, but it's not a linear thing. It's that you're lifting the productivity of the world in a way that affects everything else. The U.S., back in the 1980s and 90s, gave up investing in infrastructure. Even in America, our infrastructure is an absolute disaster. But we said, no, we're going to leave infrastructure to the private sector. Well, the private sector needs profits in the short term. They aren't going to build something that takes 30 years to get a return. It won't work. It's a British ideological concept, or British empire, not the British people, but the British. It's an imperial idea which justifies keeping the world in a state of relative backwardness. This is what we have to reverse, and we can, and the Belt and Road is heading in that direction.
This is Ashok Khan, and the Pakistani American activist. My question is, especially Mr. Linton, to you. Is right now the CPAC between the China and Pakistan. The American government already the Pakistani regime that everywhere is on the watch list. How they're going to interrupt to get the financial groundwork with the CPEC? And why not American government is going to give the break to government of Pakistan and Pakistani people to get out from the watch list? Can you explain this?
Well, let me answer in a broader way. Trump does not have an administration. He's an extremely unusual person. He campaigned against empire. If you happen to have had the opportunity to hear his speech at the United Nations, if you haven't, I encourage you to go on Google or whatever and listen to that speech. This is an extraordinary speech for an American to make. He said, when I say make America great again, I don't mean make America rule. I mean make America great again. China should make China great again. Latin America should make Latin American great again, he said. If there's going to be a solution to our migration problem, it's going to be building the economies of those countries so that people don't want to leave. And he's now in very close agreement with AMLO and the new president of Mexico to do that kind of thing, which is the real solution to the migration problem here and in Europe with the African migration. Same issue, which the Italians have picked up. The problem is that Trump is very much alone. His vice president is an imperial interest. He has been lecturing Latin America to stay away from China. They're going to take you over. This is nonsense. It's not what Trump believes. But Trump is, he is in an economy and a leadership situation in which both the Republican Party and the Democratic Party have become totally infected with this British system ideology where they have to be subservient to Wall Street. Their campaigns depend on Wall Street. They have become subservient to the idea of permanent warfare. This is anathema to reality. And yet you see both the Democratic Party and the neoconservatives and the Republican Party denouncing Trump for wanting to pull the troops out of Syria and out of Afghanistan. This is insane. What do you want, permanent warfare? Do you want to drive this until we finally have a war with China or a war with Russia, which would probably be nuclear? There's no justification for this at all. In terms of the specific aspect of the Pakistan question, if Trump succeeds in doing what he wants to do by being good friends with Xi Jinping, which he says over and over and over again, and he had this trade problem, the whole thing with the tariffs and the trade war. That was a serious trade problem. So he took it on in his way. I don't think it was the wisest way with these tariffs. But that's his way, and he's now at a point nearly of getting an agreement which will begin to deal with the trade problem and get on to the more important business which we're fighting to make happen, which is for America to join the Belt and Road. And then you've got no problem in Pakistan.
Hi, my name is Jahangir Patel, and I'm a journalist based in New York. I have one question and a few observations. I wish we had, the program was organized in a way where we had question session after each presentation. That would have been more beneficial because there was so much information and thirdly so many questions and you missed many of them, and thirdly you cannot ask all of them in one go. So I'll give you some of my thoughts since it's a discussion, and then I'll ask one question. First of all, I am 100% a believer in connectivity. Connectivity has certainly, contributed a lot to civilization throughout history. Silk Route used to be called Silk Route because there was one country which was the largest producer of silk at that time, and that was China. China built Silk Route at that time because it wanted to export its silk. And in return, the ancient world was also benefiting from Silk Route because they would send China spices. So the spice trade and silk trade was going on in those days when we did not have protectionism, when we did not have, big players, big corporations controlling the global economy. We did not have those issues. We are living in a different world. Certainly, like in the ancient world,
In today's world, we do need connectivity. We do need highways. We do need ports. We do need all these infrastructure projects. There is no discussion about that. I mean, there is no dispute. I don't think so. Anybody, even sitting in White House, will have any problem with that. Because not just Chinese goods will be going on those highways, it will be American and others as well. So I don't think so anybody will have that problem. I think at the heart of it, what you described, Mike, in your presentation, was the idea that I got was probably that these connectivity, this large-scale international connectivity, will generate more wealth, and certainly it will empower people around the world. It will reduce poverty. It will elevate people's living standards. If this highway can do that, if we have such kind of infrastructure which can deliver that, certainly everybody would love it. And I am one of them. And I am also as excited by the prospects of CPEC that have been discussed and deliberated. But I have some fears as well. Dr. Sahiba mentioned that we are talking as Pakistanis. I think for being a citizen of any country, good or bad, does not make you a good or bad citizen because you have a different opinion. So if I am from KP and I am from KP, or if I am from Balochistan, or from Punjab or Sindh, it does not make. And if I bring that perspective, I am not bringing that perspective because I am from a certain ethnic group. Yeah. I am bringing that because I live in an environment where I see a lot of disempowerment. If you look at the numbers of erstwhile FATA, I am just telling you the old numbers. In the 90s, in Pakistan, rest of Pakistan, there was one hospital bed for every 1,100 citizens. In FATA, there was one hospital bed for every 7,000 citizens. In Pakistan, there was the rest of Pakistan, the literacy rate was in 40s, higher 40s at that time. And in FATA, among women, the literacy rate was only 4%, and among women and male, it was 13 or 12 or 13%. So there was a huge difference. What it caused? People lost hope in the state. Why? Because the state failed to deliver. So when I say that I disagree with this, because I feel that this problem of extremism, which many of us believe in, that yes, it is an issue, and many still believe that it's not an issue, despite having lost 70,000 people. We, as a people, if we have to improve that region, or for that matter, the entire region, not just Pakistan, you have to really distribute development equitably.
Yes, you're right.
If you take away opportunity from me and take it to Karachi, I have to go to Karachi because I don't have any opportunity in my area. And that causes what? That causes urbanization. You have huge cities which are unmanageable because of your flawed policies. If you want to learn something, one thing that I have learned from America is the equitable distribution of development. Look at New Hampshire. It provides granite to the entire United States. Look at Delaware. It provides eggs and ham to the entire United States. Look at Georgia. It provides peach. I can give you all examples. Why? Because it developed. I just want to give my opinion and then I'll ask one question.
You're right. The distribution
so I want to say one more thing.
Yeah. In Pakistan, you're right that it shouldn't be according to population. It should be according where the need is, according to the...
Yes, that's where I'm coming to.
You're right.
I'm coming to the reality of CPEC. I'm just coming to the reality of CPEC. Look at the numbers. The numbers tell you all. 53% of the CPEC projects are going to Punjab. 4.5%, only 4.5% of the projects are going to Balochistan, where you have an active insurgency. Do you think that by building flashy roads and beautiful highways and ports and, where only foreigners will come and enjoy all the facilities, you think that it's all development? I don't think so. That will never make you strong. You have to really be more thoughtful about distribution of resources, where these projects are going. It has nothing to do with CPEC. The idea is great. but the way it is being implemented, I think, is very, very dangerous.
It was in one of my slides. This is a big issue. We should be
It's a
working
huge issue.
as
One last thing. One question that I have for Mr. Mike. I can speak forever because I have a lot to say, but I will not. I will not. But I have just one question. When you talk about international connectivity, it will create a new global economic order. How equitable will that be?
Depends on us. That depends on us. If you have this concept of what was once well known as an American system, a Renaissance concept, if you're approaching it from that high level, and I believe Xi Jinping seriously believes in what he says about win-win. The reason I believe that is because I know that Xi Jinping is in fact a Confucian. And I've studied Confucianism throughout history, through the ancient time, in the Sung Dynasty. I've shown in my writings that the Renaissance concepts of people like Nicholas of Cusa and Leonardo da Vinci and Leibniz, whom I mentioned, they recognized in Confucianism the same ennobled view of man, which is what's at the core of economics. Economics is not a cold mathematical science. Economics is the science of human progress. And if you base that concept, that science of human progress, on the idea of man as a creative being, what the Christians say, born in the image of God, what the Quran says is being vicegerent of God. This idea of being God's right hand in development. This concept is the core of what I believe the Chinese believe in, and whether they completely agree with me or not, the point is that's what we have to be committed to. If we're going to make this happen, it's going to be not just because of great leaders, but because the population, through a true renaissance, participation in beauty, in dialogue, is capable of bringing our nations together around that concept. I encourage you, by the way, the last of the three reports, I said, we have them outside. They're $50. Yes, this one. I strongly encourage you to get a copy and to read it. It's not just about the development projects. It's about economics. It's about science, about why we need to go into space, about the psychology, you might say, or the philosophy that we have to fight for. So I know we're about... there's one more.
Okay, this is the last question. I am the lucky winner for the last question. Thank you very much. Michael, wonderful job.
Thank you.
Wonderful job. The last, my name is Imran Nigra, and I'm a small business owner and a representative of an organization of Long Island Pakistani Americans called LIPA. Welcome to New York, or welcome to this event as well. I think, anybody knows Yogi Berra here? Right? Who knows? Okay, a lot of people know Yogi Berra. Yogi Berra once said about Faiq Siddiqui. You know what he said about Faiq Siddiqui? What? The events organized by Faiq Siddiquis are so crowded and jam-packed, nobody goes there anymore. So a round of applause for Faiq Siddiqui. Such a wonderful job he did. He was able to convince all of us to come here and listen to in detail what CPAC is all about. I really appreciate Dr. Saba's presentation. I think you just nailed it. I did not know all these things. The news headlines were totally different than what we just learned today. Wonderful, wonderful job. And this is in a very long time at an event where none of us got bored. It was very knowledgeable. It was very informative. I think you did a wonderful job. And my question to you all, Dr. Madnia, Dr. Saba, Michael, Elliot, Faiq Siddiqui is, since this is such a successful event, are you planning on doing any more events to inform the public across the nation or across New York? If you are, our organization, LIPA, which is the Long Island Pakistani Americans, whose few directors are also available here, will be glad to be part of IRA and be part of the Schiller's Institute. Thank you.
That was the last question of Inka Director. He's going to quick.